The Other Half. Part 1. The Empty Bassinet. The screaming started at 3:47 a.m. Sarah Brennan jerked awake in her hospital bed, her body still aching from 18 hours of labor that had ended just 6 hours ago. For a moment, she couldn't place the sound, high-pitched, desperate, somehow both near and far. Then, her mother's voice cut through the fog of exhaustion. "Sarah, Sarah, wake up!" Her mother stood in the doorway, backlit by the harsh fluorescent lights of the corridor, her face a mask of something Sarah couldn't quite read. Not quite fear, but something close. "Mom, what's wrong?" "The babies." Her mother's voice cracked. "You need to come, now." Sarah's heart lurched. She swung her legs out of bed, ignoring the protest of her body, and followed her mother into the hallway. The screaming was louder now, and Sarah realized with a jolt that it was coming from the nursery. It was her husband, Michael. She found him standing in front of 2 bassinets in the small private nursery they'd requested. One bassinet held their son. She could see the tiny form wrapped in the blue blanket they'd brought from home, his small fists waving in the air. But Michael was staring at the other bassinet, the empty bassinet. "Where is he?" Michael's voice was hollow, mechanical. "Where's our other son?" Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. She grabbed the doorframe for support, her eyes fixed on the empty space where her second son should have been. "I don't understand," she whispered. A nurse appeared at her elbow. Not the kind-faced woman who'd helped with the delivery, but someone younger, her expression pinched with concern. "Mrs. Brennan, please, you should sit down. We're looking into this." "Looking into what?" Sarah heard her own voice rise, sharp and foreign. "Where is my baby?" "We're trying to determine that right now." "The security team is reviewing footage." "Security footage? What are you saying? Someone took my son?" The nurse's silence was answer enough. Michael crossed to the remaining bassinet, his hands shaking as he lifted their son. The baby, they'd planned to name him Lucas, though they hadn't filled out the birth certificate yet, squirmed in his father's arms but didn't cry. Sarah watched, disconnected, as Michael cradled the infant against his chest with a desperate tenderness. "We should call the police," her mother said quietly, and Sarah noticed for the first time that her mother's hands were trembling too. "The hospital has already contacted them. They're on their way," the nurse said. Sarah moved to the empty bassinet as if in a dream. The blanket was still there, the green one they'd chosen, identical to Lucas's blue one except for color. She picked it up, felt its warmth, and something inside her shattered completely. The blanket was still warm. "He was just here," she said, her voice breaking. "He was just here." Detective James Walsh arrived 20 minutes later with a female officer Sarah didn't catch the name of. They'd sealed off the maternity ward, stopping parents and staff as they tried to move through the corridors. Sarah watched from the nursery as confusion turned to concern, concern to fear. Other mothers clutched their babies closer. Other fathers demanded explanations. One of her sons was somewhere in the world without her. "Mrs. Brennan, I need you to walk me through everything," Detective Walsh said. He was in his 50s, gray at the temples, with tired eyes that suggested he'd seen situations like this before. "From the moment you gave birth until now." Sarah tried to focus, tried to remember, but everything was blurring together. The pain of labor, the overwhelming relief when both babies had finally arrived, healthy and screaming, the exhaustion that had followed. "They were born at 9:32 and 9:34 p.m., she said mechanically. "Lucas first. Then—" She stopped, realizing they hadn't named the second baby yet, hadn't even discussed it seriously. They'd been so focused on making sure both survived the pregnancy that naming them had seemed like something they could do later. "Then your second son, Walsh prompted gently. Yes, he was smaller, 5 pounds 8 ounces, compared to Lucas's 6 pounds 2 ounces, but the doctor said both were healthy. Perfect. And after they were born? They cleaned them up, did all the tests, let us hold them. Michael took pictures. Sarah looked at her husband, who nodded numbly, still clutching Lucas. Then they brought them here, to the nursery, so I could sleep. I was so tired, and the nurses said it was better if they watched them for the first night. What time did you leave them here? Sarah tried to think. Maybe 11? Midnight? I'm not sure. I left around midnight, her mother interjected. The nurses encouraged us to get rest while we could. They said they'd bring the babies to Sarah when they needed feeding. And who had access to this nursery? The nurse who'd been present earlier, Sarah saw her name tag now, Jennifer, spoke up. It's a secure unit, badge access only. All staff members who work in maternity have access, but we also have cameras at every entrance. Show me the footage. They moved to a small office where a security guard had already pulled up the relevant recordings. Sarah watched the screens, her heart hammering, as the guard scrolled through timestamps. 11:47 p.m. A nurse entering the nursery, checking on the babies. 12:15 a.m. The same nurse leaving. 1:30 a.m. Another nurse entering, administering routine checks. 2:10 a.m. That nurse leaving. Then nothing. No movement in or out until 3:45 a.m. when a nurse had entered to find the empty bassinet. That's impossible, Michael said. How can the bassinet be empty if no one went in or out? There must be another entrance, Walsh said, turning to Jennifer. What about emergency exits? Windows? Jennifer's face paled. There's a door to the outside courtyard for emergencies, but it's alarmed. Show me. The door was at the far end of the nursery, disguised by a cheerful mural of clouds and birds. When Jennifer opened it, revealing a small courtyard surrounded by tall walls, Walsh examined the frame carefully. The alarm's been disabled, he said, pointing to a small piece of tape covering the sensor. Someone planned this. Sarah felt her knees buckle. Michael caught her, Lucas still somehow secure in his other arm, and guided her to a nearby chair. This was deliberate, she whispered. Someone planned to take our baby. We're going to find him, Walsh said, with a certainty Sarah desperately wanted to believe. But I need you to think carefully. Is there anyone who might have a reason to do this? Anyone who's shown unusual interest in your pregnancy? Any conflicts with family or friends? Sarah's mind raced through the past 9 months. The pregnancy had been a surprise. Twins ran in her family, but neither she nor Michael had expected it. They'd told everyone they knew, posted about it on social media, accepted congratulations from colleagues and neighbors. Had someone been watching, waiting? I can't think of anyone, she said. But even as she spoke, something nagged at her, a memory she couldn't quite grasp, floating just out of reach. The hospital went into lockdown. Police officers moved through every corridor, checking rooms, questioning staff. They interviewed every nurse who'd had access to the maternity ward, every doctor who'd been on duty, every visitor who'd signed in. The local news picked up the story by dawn. Newborn twin abducted from hospital, and Sarah's phone began ringing with calls from people she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored them all. Michael sat beside her bed, Lucas asleep in his arms, his eyes red from crying. They hadn't spoken much since the police interviews. What was there to say? Half of their world had been stolen, and they were helpless to retrieve it. Sarah's mother brought coffee neither of them drank. Her father arrived from their home 2 hours away, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by grim determination. He spoke in low tones with Detective Walsh, asking questions Sarah couldn't quite hear. Mrs. Brennan? A new voice. Sarah looked up to find a woman in a dark suit standing in the doorway, 40-something, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. I'm Special Agent Monica Torres, FBI. The Bureau has been called in to assist with your son's case. FBI. The word made it real in a way nothing else had. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was a federal crime. You work on kidnappings? Sarah asked. I specialize in infant abductions, yes, and I need to ask you some questions that might seem intrusive, but I promise you they're necessary. Sarah nodded numbly. Have you or your husband been involved in any custody disputes, previous relationships with children involved? No. Lucas and... She still couldn't name him. The babies are our first. Any history of mental health issues, depression, psychosis, anything that might affect judgment? No, nothing like that. What about fertility treatments? Did you use any assisted reproductive technology? The question caught Sarah off guard. We used IVF. It took 3 attempts, but the last one worked. We got pregnant with twins. Agent Torres made notes. Which clinic? Riverside Fertility Center. Dr. Helena Marsh was our specialist. And you were happy with the service? No complications, concerns, conflicts? None. Dr. Marsh was wonderful. She helped us when we thought we might never have children. I'll need to speak with her. Torres glanced at Michael. Mr. Brennan, do you work in any field that might make you a target? Finance, law enforcement, politics? I'm a high school teacher, Michael said flatly. History. I don't think anyone's kidnapping babies over the Treaty of Versailles. A ghost of a smile crossed Torres's face. What about you, Mrs. Brennan? I'm a graphic designer, freelance. I work from home. So no recent conflicts at work? No disgruntled clients or competitors? No, my clients are mostly small businesses, birthday cake companies, local restaurants, nothing controversial. Torres studied them both for a long moment. Here's what I need you to understand. Infant abductions typically fall into a few categories. Sometimes it's someone who's lost a child and is trying to replace them. Sometimes it's someone who's pretended to be pregnant and needs a baby to maintain the deception. And sometimes, she paused, sometimes it's someone who believes they have a legitimate claim to the child. What does that mean? Michael asked. It means we need to look at every connection to these babies. The IVF clinic, the hospital staff, your social circle, your family history. Someone took your son for a reason, and that reason is the key to finding him. Part 2. Secrets Surfacing. They let Sarah go home on the second day, though leaving the hospital felt like abandonment. She clutched Lucas in the car, unable to look at the empty car seat beside her, the one they'd installed for his brother. Their house was exactly as they'd left it 2 days ago, but transformed by absence. The nursery they'd prepared with such care now felt like a monument to loss. 2 cribs, 2 dressers, 2 of everything. Sarah stood in the doorway, unable to enter. We'll find him, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. The FBI had set up operations in their living room, with Agent Torres coordinating with local police. They'd placed a tap on the phone in case of ransom demands, though Torres had warned them that ransom was unlikely in infant abduction cases. Usually, the person who takes the baby wants to keep them, she'd explained. They're not looking for money. They're looking for a child. The thought made Sarah physically ill. Her phone rang constantly, journalists requesting interviews, well-meaning friends offering support, strangers who'd seen the news and wanted to share their theories. Michael's mother called hourly, demanding updates, making suggestions, ultimately making everything worse. But it was a call on the 3rd day that changed everything. Mrs. Brennan, this is Dr. Helena Marsh. Sarah's heart leaped. Dr. Marsh, have you heard? I've heard. The FBI came to see me yesterday. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something, in person. Can you come to the clinic? Now? Please, it's important. Riverside Fertility Center looked the same as it always had. Modern, clean, designed to project hope and competence. Sarah had spent so many hours here over the past 2 years, enduring tests and procedures and disappointments, that walking through the doors felt like visiting an old friend. Dr. Marsh met her in a private consultation room. She looked tired, older than Sarah remembered, and there was something in her expression that sent ice through Sarah's veins. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Marsh said, gesturing for Sarah to sit. "I've been debating whether to tell you this. It might mean nothing, but after the FBI's questions, I realized I had to." "Tell me what?" Dr. Marsh took a breath. "During your IVF cycle, we created 8 viable embryos. You and Michael decided to implant 2, and the rest were frozen for potential future use. That's all standard procedure." "I remember," Sarah said. They'd discussed it extensively, the ethics, the implications, the hope. "What you don't know is that there was a complication, an administrative one." Sarah's stomach tightened. "What kind of complication?" "Another patient, a woman named Catherine Walker, was undergoing IVF at the same time. Similar age, similar profile, and due to a labeling error in our lab." "No," Sarah whispered. "We're not certain. The lab techs caught the error and corrected it immediately. But there's a small possibility, very small, but real, that one of the embryos implanted in you belonged to Catherine Walker." The room spun. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair, trying to process what she was hearing. "Are you saying one of my sons might not be mine?" "I'm saying we can't be 100% certain without genetic testing. And Sarah, there's more. Catherine Walker has been trying to get pregnant for 5 years. She spent her entire savings on IVF, and her last cycle, the one running concurrent with yours, failed. She didn't get pregnant." "Did you tell her about the error?" "We decided not to, since we believed we'd caught it in time. But now, with one of your sons missing, I had to wonder. If she found out," Sarah finished, "if she somehow discovered what happened and decided to take what she believes is hers. I'm not accusing anyone, but the FBI asked if there was anyone who might feel they had a claim to your children, and I couldn't keep this information from you." Sarah stood, her legs shaking. "I need her name, her address, everything you have on Catherine Walker. I've already given it to the FBI. Agent Torres is looking into it." Sarah barely heard her. She was already moving toward the door, her mind racing. Catherine Walker, a woman desperate for a child, a woman who might believe one of the babies Sarah had birthed was actually hers, a woman who might have been watching, waiting, planning. Agent Torres was at Sarah's house when she returned, her expression grave. "We've located Catherine Walker," she said without preamble. "She's agreed to come in for questioning. And we need to proceed carefully. If she's involved, pushing too hard could endanger your son. If she's not, we're wasting time we don't have. What does your gut tell you?" Torres hesitated. "My gut says she knows something." But knowing something and being responsible are different things. They brought Catherine Walker to the FBI field office that afternoon. Torres let Sarah watch through a one-way mirror as they interviewed her. Catherine was 38, thin to the point of frailty, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She sat rigidly in her chair, her hands clasped in her lap, answering questions in a voice barely above a whisper. "Ms. Walker, do you know why we've asked you here today?" "Dr. Marsh told me. About the lab error. About Sarah Brennan's babies." "Were you aware of this error before today?" "No. Dr. Marsh said they'd caught it immediately, that nothing had been compromised." "But you were undergoing IVF at the same time as Mrs. Brennan?" "Yes." "And your cycle was unsuccessful?" Catherine's face crumpled. "Yes." "That must have been difficult." "It was the end of everything. I'd spent all my money. There would be no more chances. No baby, no family." Her voice broke. No point. Torres leaned forward. Ms. Walker, one of Mrs. Brennan's twin sons was taken from the hospital 3 days ago. Can you tell me where you were that night? Home, alone. Is there anyone who can verify that? No, I live by myself. Have you been to Riverside Memorial Hospital recently? I had an appointment there last week, follow-up from my failed cycle. Which department? Gynecology, 2nd floor. Sarah watched Catherine's face, trying to read guilt or deception in her features, but all she saw was profound sadness, a grief so complete it seemed to radiate from her like cold. Ms. Walker, did you take Sarah Brennan's baby? Catherine looked directly at the mirror, as if she could see Sarah watching. No, but I understand why you'd think I might. If I believed one of those babies was supposed to be mine, if I thought a mistake had stolen my chance at motherhood, she paused. I don't know what I might do. That's the honest truth. I don't know anymore what I'm capable of. They had to let her go. No evidence tied Catherine Walker to the abduction. She'd been at the hospital the week before, yes, but in a different department. She had no badge access to the maternity ward, no connection to any staff members who might have helped her. The security footage didn't show her anywhere near the nursery. She could have hired someone, Michael insisted when Torres briefed them, or had an accomplice. Possibly, but we have nothing concrete. Her phone records don't show unusual activity. Her financial records don't show large cash withdrawals. We're watching her, but we can't arrest her on suspicion alone. Sarah felt desperation clawing at her chest. Then what do? We keep investigating. We're interviewing everyone who had access to that ward. We're expanding our search to include family members, friends, acquaintances. Someone knows something. But days passed with no breaks. A week. Sarah moved through her house like a ghost, feeding Lucas, changing him, but feeling disconnected from everything. She'd look at his face and try to remember what his brother had looked like. The memories were already fading. She'd only held him for a few hours before they'd taken him to the nursery. She hadn't even named him. Michael threw himself into searching, creating social media campaigns, organizing search parties, contacting every news outlet that would listen. But Sarah could see it in his eyes, the growing hopelessness, the terrible knowledge that with each passing day, the chances of finding their son alive diminished. On day 10, Agent Torres came to the house with news. We found something in the hospital security footage, something we missed initially. She pulled up a video on her laptop. This is from the parking garage, 3 hours before your son was taken. The footage showed a woman in scrubs entering through a side door. She moved quickly, purposefully, her face partially obscured by a surgical cap and mask. Now watch this. Torres fast-forwarded to 4 a.m., just after the abduction was discovered. The same woman appeared, moving even faster, carrying something wrapped in a blanket. That's him, Sarah whispered. That's our baby. We believe so. The problem is we can't identify this woman. The disguise is too complete. But look at this. Torres zoomed in on the woman's left hand. A distinctive ring glinted on her finger, a thick band with an unusual pattern. We've shown this to all the hospital staff. No one recognizes it, which means this woman isn't a regular employee. So she disguised herself as a nurse, Michael said, disabled the alarm, waited until no one was watching, and took him. That's our working theory. And the disguise, the planning, the timing, it all suggests someone with inside knowledge of the hospital's security procedures. Or someone who did research, Sarah said. Anyone can look up floor plans online. Anyone can buy scrubs. True, but this level of execution requires more than research. It requires confidence, familiarity. We're looking at hospital employees, former staff, anyone with a connection to the facility. Sarah stared at the frozen image of the woman carrying her son. She looks familiar. Torres sat forward. Familiar how? I don't know. Something about the way she moves, her body language. Sarah shook her head, frustrated. I can't place it. Keep thinking. Even the smallest detail could help. Part 3. The connection. The answer came at 2 a.m. when Sarah couldn't sleep and was scrolling through old photos on her phone. She'd been looking at pregnancy pictures, torturing herself with memories of those 9 months when both babies had been safe inside her. She'd progressed through the trimesters, the first ultrasound where they discovered there were 2 heartbeats, the gender reveal, the baby shower her mother had organized. And there, in the background of a photo from the baby shower, was a woman Sarah had forgotten about entirely, her mother's friend, Patricia. Sarah zoomed in on the photo, her heart racing. Patricia was standing near the gift table, watching Sarah open presents with an expression that Sarah had interpreted as warm interest at the time. But looking at it now, seeing the intensity in Patricia's gaze, the way her hands clutched her purse, Sarah grabbed her phone and called Agent Torres. "I know who she is," Sarah said the moment Torres answered, not bothering with pleasantries. "The woman from the footage, I know who she is." 20 minutes later, Torres was at her house studying the photo. "Patricia Brennan," Sarah said. "My mother-in-law's sister, Michael's aunt." Michael looked stunned. "Aunt Patricia? That's impossible. She lives in Oregon. I haven't seen her in years." "When was the last time you saw her?" Torres asked. "My father's funeral, 5 years ago. She and my mom had some kind of falling out afterward. They don't speak anymore." "What was the falling out about?" Michael hesitated. "I don't know exactly. Mom won't talk about it. She gets really upset if Patricia's name even comes up." Torres was already on her phone, issuing instructions to her team. "We need everything on Patricia Brennan. Current address, employment history, medical records, financial records. I want to know everywhere she's been for the past month." She turned back to Michael. "Is there any reason Patricia would want to take your son? Any history of mental health issues, obsession with babies, anything like that?" "Not that I know of. She always seemed normal. Quiet, maybe a bit intense, but normal." "What did she do for work?" "She was a nurse. At least, she used to be. I don't know if she still practices." Torres and Sarah exchanged looks. A nurse, someone with medical training, someone who would know how to move through a hospital unnoticed, someone who would understand security protocols. "We need to talk to your mother," Torres said. Michael's mother, Linda Brennan, arrived at the house within the hour, her face pale and drawn. "Tell me everything about Patricia," Torres said without preamble. Linda sank into a chair, looking suddenly old. "She's my younger sister. We were close growing up. She became a nurse, worked in pediatrics for years. She loved children." "Did she have any of her own?" Linda's expression crumpled. "She wanted them desperately, but she couldn't. Multiple miscarriages, fertility issues. She tried everything, IVF, surrogates, nothing worked. It destroyed her marriage, her career. She became unstable." "Unstable how?" "Obsessed. She would follow pregnant women in grocery stores, show up at baby showers uninvited, offer to babysit for strangers. It got bad enough that she lost her nursing license. That's when we had our falling out. I tried to get her help, but she refused. Said I was betraying her, that I didn't understand her pain." "When was this?" 5 years ago, right after my husband died. Patricia came to the funeral, but she was different, disconnected. She kept talking about how unfair it was that she couldn't have children while other women took them for granted. She made a scene, and I had to ask her to leave. We haven't spoken since." Torres leaned forward. "Linda, did Patricia know about Sarah's pregnancy?" "I don't see how. We don't communicate at all." "Social media? Mutual friends?" Linda's face went white. "Oh God, I posted about it. When Michael called to tell me they were having twins, I was so excited that I posted it on Facebook. And Patricia, she's still my friend on Facebook. I never unfriended her. I never thought." "She's been watching," Sarah said quietly. "This whole time, she's been watching." Torres was already coordinating with her team. "We're getting a warrant for Patricia's residence in Oregon. If your son is there? But why take only one? Michael interrupted. If she's so desperate for a baby, why not take both? The question hung in the air. Torres frowned, considering. Maybe she couldn't carry both, Sarah suggested. Or maybe... She looked at Lucas, sleeping peacefully in his bouncer. Maybe she knew taking both would be too suspicious. Taking one twin, it's devastating, but it's not the complete destruction of our family. We still have Lucas. Maybe she thought that would make us less determined to find the other one. Or, Torres said slowly, maybe she believes she has a legitimate claim to only one of them. Sarah felt cold spread through her chest. The lab error? Catherine Walker? If Patricia found out about that, if she somehow learned that one of your embryos might have belonged to someone else, she might believe she's not stealing a baby. She might believe she's rescuing one. But how would she know about that? Michael asked. That information is confidential. We'll find out. Right now, our priority is locating Patricia and your son. The FBI raided Patricia Brennan's apartment in Portland, Oregon at dawn the next day. Sarah watched the operation unfold via video feed from the field office, gripping Michael's hand so tightly her fingers ached. She could see agents surrounding a small apartment building, entering with weapons drawn, methodically clearing rooms. The apartment was empty. But inside, they found evidence that made Sarah's blood run cold. One wall was covered in photos. Photos of Sarah throughout her pregnancy, photos of the hospital where she'd given birth, photos of the nursery window from outside. Patricia had been stalking them for months. There was also a nursery set up in the apartment's spare bedroom, a crib, a changing table, baby clothes in newborn sizes. And on the wall, a name written in careful script. Michael Jr., said Torres grimly. This wasn't impulsive. She prepared for months. But where is she? Sarah asked desperately. Where did she take him? They found the answer in Patricia's computer. Searches for remote properties, inquiries about cabin rentals in Washington state, and an email confirmation for a property 3 hours north of Seattle. She's running, Torres said. She knows we're looking for her now. We need to move fast. Part 4. The confrontation. They traveled to Washington in a convoy. FBI agents, local police, Michael and Sarah in a separate vehicle with Torres. The drive took 4 hours, each minute feeling like an eternity. The cabin was deep in the woods, accessible only by a rough dirt road. As they approached, Sarah could see smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was home. Stay in the car, Torres instructed. No matter what happens, stay here until we give the all clear. Sarah nodded, though every fiber of her being wanted to run to that cabin, to find her son, to bring him home. Michael's hand found hers again, and they sat in tense silence as agents surrounded the property. Through the trees, Sarah could see movement inside the cabin, a woman's silhouette passing a window. Then, faintly, the sound of a baby crying. That's him, Sarah whispered. I know that's him. Torres approached the cabin, calling out, Patricia Brennan, this is the FBI. We know you're inside. We know you have Michael Brennan Jr. We need you to come out with the baby. No one needs to get hurt. Silence. Then, the cabin door opened slowly. Patricia emerged, and Sarah felt a jolt of recognition. This was the woman from the baby shower, from Michael's old family photos, but she looked different now. Thinner, wild-eyed, holding a bundle wrapped in a green blanket against her chest. He's mine, Patricia called out, her voice cracking. You don't understand. He's mine. He was always supposed to be mine. Patricia, that's not true, Torres said calmly. That baby belongs to Sarah and Michael. You took him from the hospital. You know that's wrong. No! Patricia clutched the baby tighter, making him wail. The other woman, Catherine, that embryo was hers. This baby was never meant to be Sarah's. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I'm fixing it. I'm taking him to his real mother. Sarah's heart stopped. She's taking him to Catherine Walker? She thinks she's helping, Torres murmured. She's convinced herself she's doing the right thing. Patricia, Torres called out, Catherine Walker doesn't want this. She didn't ask you to take this baby. This isn't helping anyone. You're lying. She deserves a child. After everything she's been through, she deserves this chance. Not Sarah. Sarah didn't even want these babies. She got them by accident, by mistake. Catherine tried for years. She suffered. She earned this. How do you know Catherine? Torres asked. We were in the same support group for women dealing with infertility. We shared our pain. I told her about the lab error. I was there that day, visiting Dr. Marsh about my own case, and I overheard the lab techs talking. I saw the paperwork. I knew which embryo was hers. Sarah felt sick. The pieces were falling into place. Patricia had learned about the error, had connected with Catherine in a support group, had convinced herself she was rescuing a baby from the wrong family. Did Catherine ask you to take the baby? Torres asked. No, she doesn't know. But when I give him to her, when she sees him, she'll understand. She'll know he was meant to be hers. Patricia, please, you're not thinking clearly. That baby needs medical care. He needs to be fed, changed. I know how to take care of a baby. Patricia's voice rose to a shriek. I was a pediatric nurse for 15 years. I know more about babies than Sarah ever will. She was spiraling. Sarah could see it. Becoming more desperate, more irrational. Torres had to be careful, or Patricia might do something unpredictable. I believe you, Torres said soothingly. I believe you love babies, that you know how to care for them. But this baby needs his mother, his real mother. Sarah carried him for 9 months. She gave birth to him. He knows her voice, her heartbeat. He needs her. No, Patricia said, but her voice wavered. No, he needs Catherine. She's his genetic mother. DNA doesn't lie. We don't know that, Torres said. We don't know which embryo was implanted. It might have been Sarah and Michael's embryo after all. The only way to know for sure is through testing, legal testing, not this. Patricia stood at the cabin door, swaying slightly, the baby's cries intensifying. Sarah could see her resolve cracking, reality seeping through the delusion. Patricia, Torres said gently, you're not a bad person. You're someone who suffered tremendous loss. But taking this baby won't heal that loss. It will only create more pain. For everyone, including you. Patricia's voice broke. I just wanted to hold a baby, to feel like a mother, just once. I know, Torres said, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything you've been through, but this isn't the answer. Please, let me help you. Let me help that baby. Give him to me. For a long moment, Patricia didn't move. Then, slowly, she descended the cabin steps. Her arms loosened slightly, and Torres moved forward carefully, reaching for the baby. Patricia handed him over. The moment the baby was secure in Torres's arms, other agents moved in, gently restraining Patricia. She didn't resist. She simply crumpled, sinking to the ground, sobbing with a grief so profound it seemed to shake the very trees around them. Torres carried the baby to the car, and Sarah was out the door before Michael could stop her. She ran across the clearing, her arms outstretched, and Torres placed the bundle in her hands. Sarah pulled back the blanket and saw his face, older than she remembered, 10 days of life having changed him already, but unmistakably her son. He stopped crying immediately when he heard her voice, his small hand closing around her finger. Hello, baby, she whispered. I'm here. Mommy's here. You're safe now. Michael appeared at her side, tears streaming down his face. Is he okay? Is he hurt? Torres examined the baby quickly, her experienced hands checking for injuries. He looks healthy, but we need to get him to a hospital for a full evaluation. Sarah nodded, but couldn't let go. She held him against her chest, feeling his warmth, his small movements, the reassuring rhythm of his breathing. Michael wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a moment they stood like that, a family reunited, incomplete no more. Behind them, paramedics were attending to Patricia, who sat on the ground in a daze, still crying. Sarah looked at her, this woman who'd caused so much pain, who'd stolen her son, and felt something unexpected, pity. Patricia looked up, meeting Sarah's eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to be a mother so badly." Sarah didn't respond. She couldn't. There was nothing to say that would bridge the chasm between them, nothing that would make any of this okay. She simply turned away, carrying her son back to the car. Part 5. Aftermath. The hospital examination revealed that the baby was remarkably healthy despite his ordeal. Patricia had cared for him well, fed him formula, kept him clean, even taken him to a walk-in clinic when she'd worried about a slight fever. In her delusion, she'd been a conscientious caretaker. She genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, the psychiatrist who evaluated Patricia told Sarah and Michael later. She'd constructed an entire narrative where she was rescuing your son, bringing him to his real mother. The infertility trauma, the loss of her nursing career, the isolation, it all culminated in a psychotic break from reality. "Will she go to prison?" Michael asked. "She'll face charges, yes, but given her mental state, she'll likely be committed to a psychiatric facility rather than a prison. She needs treatment, not punishment." Sarah thought about that. Part of her wanted Patricia to suffer as she'd suffered, but mostly she just wanted to move forward, to heal, to focus on her family. They named him Ethan, Sarah's grandfather's name, strong and solid. Lucas and Ethan Brennan, their miracle twins. But there was still one more piece of the puzzle to resolve. 2 weeks after bringing Ethan home, Sarah received a call from Dr. Marsh. "The DNA results are in," she said. "Would you like to know?" Sarah looked at Lucas and Ethan, sleeping side by side in their cribs. They looked so similar, the same nose, the same ears, the same dark hair. But Ethan was smaller, his features slightly more delicate. "Does it matter?" Sarah asked. "Legally, no. Both boys are yours. You carried them, you birthed them. But if you want to know..." Sarah thought about Catherine Walker, the woman who'd lost so much. She thought about what Patricia had believed, what had driven her to such desperate measures. "Tell me." Dr. Marsh took a breath. "Both embryos were yours and Michael's. The lab error was caught in time. Lucas and Ethan are your biological sons." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Thank you for telling me." "There's one more thing. Catherine Walker asked if she could meet with you. She wants to apologize. She feels partially responsible for what Patricia did. I told her I'd pass along the message, but only if you're comfortable." Sarah looked at her sleeping sons again. "Tell her yes. Tell her I'd like to meet." They met at a coffee shop near the fertility clinic. Catherine looked even more fragile in person than she had in the interview room, like a strong wind might blow her away. But there was something different in her eyes now, a clarity that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for seeing me," Catherine said quietly. "I know you didn't have to." "Patricia said you were in a support group together." Catherine nodded. "For women dealing with infertility. It's where we share our pain, our frustration. Patricia seemed to understand what I was going through better than anyone. She'd suffered similar losses." "She told you about the lab error?" "Yes, but I never asked her to do anything about it. I never even suggested it. When I heard what she'd done," Catherine's voice broke, "I was horrified. The idea that she thought she was helping me by stealing your baby." "She was mentally ill," Sarah said. "She wasn't thinking rationally." "I know, But I can't help feeling that if I hadn't been so open about my grief, if I hadn't shared so much with her, maybe she wouldn't have. Catherine stopped, unable to continue. Sarah reached across the table and took Catherine's hand. None of this was your fault. Patricia made her own choices, driven by her own pain. You can't take responsibility for that. Catherine looked up, tears streaming down her face. How can you be so kind to me after everything? Because I understand, Sarah said. Not what you've been through with infertility. I can't fully understand that. But I understand grief. I understand loss. And I understand that sometimes people do terrible things because they're drowning in pain. They sat in silence for a moment, two women connected by tragedy and circumstance. I'm stopping the IVF treatments, Catherine said eventually. I can't keep doing this to myself. The emotional toll, the financial stress, it's destroying me. I'm sorry. Don't be. I think I need to find other ways to build a family. Maybe adoption, maybe fostering. Or maybe I need to accept that motherhood might look different than I imagined. She smiled sadly. Your sons are beautiful, by the way. I saw their photos on the news. You're very lucky. I am, Sarah agreed. So very lucky. The trial came 6 months later. Patricia Brennan was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a state psychiatric hospital for treatment. The judge was compassionate but firm. Patricia would remain in treatment until doctors determined she was no longer a danger to herself or others. Linda Brennan attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery with tears streaming down her face. Afterward, she approached Sarah and Michael. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I should have known. I should have seen how unstable Patricia had become. I should have warned you. You couldn't have known, Michael said, embracing his mother. None of us could have predicted this. But Sarah wondered. There had been signs. Patricia's intensity at the baby shower, Linda's reluctance to talk about her sister, the history of obsessive behavior. Maybe, if they'd known, if they'd been warned, they could have been more cautious. Or maybe it wouldn't have mattered. Patricia had been determined, had planned for months. She'd found a way. Lucas and Ethan thrived. They grew from fragile newborns into robust infants, hitting their milestones, developing distinct personalities. Lucas was bold and loud, demanding attention. Ethan was quieter, more contemplative, but with a determination that surprised them. Sarah would watch them sometimes, marveling at how close she'd come to losing half of this, how 10 days of not knowing where Ethan was had nearly destroyed her, how the empty bassinet haunted her dreams for months. She started a blog for other parents of abducted children, sharing her story, offering support. She connected with families across the country who'd experienced similar trauma, who understood the particular hell of having a child stolen. And slowly, painfully, she healed. On the twins' first birthday, Sarah and Michael held a small party, just family and close friends. Linda came, bringing elaborate gifts and apologies she'd made dozens of times already. Sarah's parents were there, her mother fussing over the decorations, trying to make everything perfect. As Sarah watched Lucas and Ethan dig into their smash cakes, covering themselves in frosting with gleeful abandon, she felt Michael's arm around her shoulders. "Can you believe it's been a year?" he asked. "Feels like a lifetime," Sarah said, "and also like yesterday. Do you ever think about what Patricia said, about Ethan being meant for Catherine?" Sarah looked at her sons, so clearly twins, so obviously brothers, so undeniably hers. No, because he wasn't. The DNA proved that. But even if it hadn't, even if one of them had come from a different embryo, they'd still both be ours. Biology isn't what makes a family. What does? Love, time, commitment, showing up every day, even when it's hard, even when you're terrified, even when half of your world is missing and you don't know if you'll ever get it back. Michael kissed her temple. We got him back. We did, Sarah agreed. We're so incredibly lucky. Patricia Brennan sat in her room at the psychiatric facility, looking at the photos she was allowed to keep, family photos from before everything fell apart. There was one of her and Linda as girls, arms around each other, smiling at the camera. Another of her wedding day, so young and hopeful. A third of her in her nurse's uniform, proud and competent. She didn't have any photos of the baby she'd taken. The doctors had deemed them unhealthy, evidence of her continuing delusion. But she could still see his face when she closed her eyes. Those dark eyes, that small nose, those tiny fingers that had gripped hers with such surprising strength. She understood now that what she'd done was wrong. The medication and therapy had cleared the fog that had surrounded her thinking for so long. But understanding didn't erase the longing, the ache for something she would never have. Patricia? Her therapist, Dr. Raymond, stood in the doorway. It's time for group therapy. Patricia stood slowly, taking one last look at the photos before following him down the hall. In the group room, other patients sat in a circle, people who'd done terrible things while in the grip of mental illness, people trying to reconcile who they'd been with who they were now. Today, we're talking about forgiveness, Dr. Raymond said, specifically forgiving ourselves. Patricia listened as others shared their stories, their struggles with guilt and shame. When it was her turn, she took a deep breath. I hurt a family, she said. I took their baby because I thought I was helping, but I was really just trying to fill the emptiness inside myself, and I know I'll never be able to make that right. Forgiveness isn't about making things right, Dr. Raymond said gently. It's about accepting what happened and choosing to move forward anyway. Can you do that? Patricia thought about Sarah and Michael, about Linda, about Catherine Walker, all the lives she'd touched with her pain. She thought about the baby she'd held for 10 days, believing he was her chance at redemption. I don't know, she said honestly, but I'm trying. Epilogue, 5 years later. Sarah stood at the kindergarten classroom door, watching Lucas and Ethan play with blocks alongside other 5-year-olds. They were so big now, so independent, barely resembling the tiny infants she'd brought home from the hospital. Lucas was building an elaborate tower, explaining his architectural vision to any child who would listen. Ethan was working more quietly, but his structure was carefully planned, each block placed with precision. They're wonderful boys, their teacher, Mrs. Chen, said, appearing beside Sarah. So different from each other, but they work together beautifully. They've always been a team, Sarah said. Even when they were apart, I think they knew they belonged together. She'd told the twins an age-appropriate version of their story, that Ethan had been lost for a little while when he was a baby, but that everyone had worked very hard to bring him home. They accepted it with the easy resilience of children, asking occasional questions, but mostly just moving forward with their lives. They didn't remember those 10 days. For them, they'd always been together, always been a pair, and Sarah was grateful for that. Let them grow up without the weight of what had happened. Let them be children without the shadow of trauma. Michael appeared in the hallway, carrying their 3-year-old daughter, Sophia. They'd waited, processed the trauma, healed as much as they could before deciding to expand their family. And this time, the pregnancy had been straightforward, unremarkable, blissfully boring. Ready to go? Michael asked. Sarah nodded, collecting the twins from the classroom. As they walked to the car, Lucas and Ethan racing ahead while chattering about their day, Sophia babbling contentedly in Michael's arms, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude. They were whole. They were together. They were happy. Not perfect. They still had hard days, moments when Sarah would wake from nightmares about empty bassinets, times when Michael would hold the twins a little too tight, as if afraid they might disappear. The trauma would always be part of their story. But it wasn't their whole story. Their story was also about love and resilience and the fierce determination of people who refused to give up. It was about a family torn apart and painstakingly stitched back together. It was about finding joy in ordinary moments, appreciating what they had instead of mourning what they'd almost lost. "Mom," Ethan called from the car, "can we get ice cream?" "Please," Lucas added. "We've been really good today." Sarah looked at Michael, who shrugged with a smile. "Why not?"